The Zilthor Citadel station orbited a quiet, uninhabited moon in the dead center of neutral space, chosen not for its beauty, but for the equal discomfort it offered every attending species. The atmosphere inside the Grand Convergence Hall was one of forced civility stretched thin over centuries of mistrust. Tension radiated from scaled hides, chitinous limbs, and bioluminescent throats as representatives of 42 civilizations sat behind polished obsidian tables, waiting for the last delegation to arrive. They came late. Of course, humans. The airlock hissed open with a heavy breath, and 3 Terran delegates stepped through, armed, unsmiling, and entirely unaware of the silent alarm their presence triggered. Leading them was Captain Elias Kane, a mountain of muscle wrapped in crisp black formal wear. Though his stance betrayed years of combat training, he hadn't yet forgotten. He scanned the room like a predator, not out of menace but simple habit. His steel-gray eyes locked on every entry point, every irregularity in posture among alien guards, and then settled on the central podium. Behind him walked Ambassador Martin Graves, slim and sharply dressed in a suit that was stylish in the way a scalpel is elegant, cold, clinical, and designed to slice. His movements were precise, his expression unreadable. And last came Dr. Theo Vance, whose slightly rumpled lab coat and constant muttering into a datapad made him look less threatening than the other 2. But the moment he looked up and smiled sincerely, openly, 3 aquatic diplomats recoiled from their tanks. Mistaking the bared teeth for a predatory, gestured silence followed them like a shadow. Kane muttered to Graves, "They're all staring." Graves didn't blink. "They think we're dangerous." "Well, aren't we?" Theo glanced up, brushing auburn strands from his face. "Technically, every life form is dangerous if you misread the signals. We're being misread. All right," Kane replied dryly. As the humans took their seats, the room's tension escalated. One delegate, an insectoid Avrix commander, made a series of panicked clicks and abruptly left, his translator flailing to convert a string of warning pheromones into coherent speech. The humans didn't notice. Theo was busy scanning the alien delegations, his scientific curiosity drowning out the subtle social cues to the humans. This was just diplomacy. To the rest of the galaxy, this was the equivalent of inviting apex predators to a herbivore summit. The Zilthor Prime Facilitator, towering crystalline being, activated his voice node, the pulsing crystals dimming in the ambient light. "Terran Alliance delegation, we are honored by your arrival." Martin Graves stood smoothly, his voice calm and deliberate. "The honor is mutual, Facilitator. The Terran Alliance is committed to the cause of peace and cooperative progress." Simple words, harmless. Yet the Arva diplomats, who had evolved under centuries of silent warfare, interpreted committed as unrelenting. They logged it in their records as a veiled threat. Graves sat down. Theo leaned toward him, whispering, "You might want to avoid phrases with military undertones. Some of these species evolved without direct confrontation. They don't separate strength from intent." Graves sighed softly. "I'm not used to people being afraid of words." Kane grinned faintly. "Get used to it." The next few minutes were filled with orchestrated welcomes from other delegations, none of which looked the humans in the eye. When refreshments were offered, the humans politely declined the gelatinous or gaseous substances passed around except for Kane, who unwrapped a protein bar from his belt and bit into it with a soft crunch. Across the room, dozen species logged it as a ritualistic display of dominance. Eating before a gathering meant asserting ownership of the territory. "Maybe don't eat," Theo whispered. "I'm hungry," Kane shrugged. "They think you're demonstrating territorial control." Kane chewed slowly, deliberately now. "Then it's working." Theo pinched the bridge of his nose. Across the hall, several delegations began whispering via internal membranes, psychic pulses, or biolumicode. Observations spread rapidly. Human musculature suggested high-gravity origin. Bipedal symmetry meant ambush efficiency. Speech patterns were too calm, too precise. Even their laughter, when Kane cracked a quiet joke about the alien beverages, triggered another wave of diplomatic analysis. Was that mirth or a signal? An Uvarian diplomat leaned to his aide. They are not here for peace. They are scouting, measuring, calculating. His aide agreed. We must assume Earth's peace initiative is a smokescreen. They pacified the Dravix war clans in under 30 days. No species has done that in centuries. They smiled while doing it. Another added, trembling. Back at the Terran table, Theo pulled up several translation streams on his datapad and frowned. They're misinterpreting almost everything we do, he said under his breath. Graves looked over. Can you correct it? Theo shook his head, not without appearing defensive, and that'll only confirm their suspicions. Kane leaned back, arms folded. So let them think what they want. Better to be feared than underestimated. Graves gave him a sidelong glance. That's not diplomacy. That's survivalism. Kane offered a shrug. They're not mutually exclusive. The evening session concluded with ceremonial acknowledgments and scheduling of working groups. Each delegation was to prepare a position paper for tomorrow's negotiation round. As they filed out, most alien envoys gave the humans a wide berth. The Lina delegation even left behind a symbolic tributa, polished stone carved with their species symbol for yield. Theo stared at it in confusion. We didn't even do anything, he said. Kane picked it up. That's the part that scares them? Back in their assigned quarters, Graves sat on the edge of a sleek, alien-fabricated lounge and unbuttoned his collar. Tomorrow, we actually speak policy. If they're this jumpy now, I don't know how they'll handle our economic models. Theo sat cross-legged on the floor, typing frantically. We need to find a way to downplay our military history. Maybe include some footage of humanitarian aid projects. Something warm, soft. Kane leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. They're not afraid of what we've done. They're afraid of what we could do. The room was silent for a moment. Then Graves spoke, his voice low and measured. Let's tread lightly tomorrow. If fear keeps them from starting another war, fine. But if it keeps them from peace, then we're exactly what they think we are. Outside, the stars drifted in the void, oblivious to the paranoia swelling in the hearts of every species aboard the station. Peace was the mission. But peace, as it turned out, was more terrifying than war when it came wearing a human face. And the humans had just arrived. The morning began with a soft chime that echoed across the station, signaling the opening of formal peace deliberations. Within minutes, representatives were filing into the Grand Convergence Hall, many of them moving slower than usual. Their subtle body languages broadcasting unease. Overnight, rumors had spread like plasma fire through vacuum. Every account of the humans, how they walked, spoke. Even breath had been distorted and repeated until the simplest gestures seemed ominous. Captain Elias Kane arrived early, seated with the composed stillness of a man used to waiting in dangerous places. He tracked the movement of each delegate like a wolf watching a herd, not with menace, but calm awareness. He wasn't trying to be intimidating. He was trying to be professional. Unfortunately, the result was the same. Ambassador Martin Graves arrived next, adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket as if he were preparing for a court trial. His face was unreadable, though his eyes missed nothing. He greeted several delegates with curt nods, and each nod was logged by alien observers as calculated restraint. His refusal to smile wasn't rudeness, was deliberate. Strategic, chilling, Dr. Theo Vance. Oblivious to most of the chaos his species was inspiring, walked in while analyzing his datapad. He looked up only long enough to wave at the crystalline, Zilther host, nearly blinding the poor being with a bright grin. The Zilther recoiled, mistaking the baring of teeth for a threat display. Theo frowned, made a mental note, and quietly added smiling equals aggressive behavior to crystal-based entities. The first agenda item was cultural transparency. Each species was asked to present a short, symbolic summary of their diplomatic philosophy. When it came to the Terran's turn, Graves stepped forward, cleared his throat, and began. "Peace," he said, his voice steady, is not the absence of conflict. It's the triumph of cooperation over division. We believe in burying the hatchet, figuratively speaking, and forging alliances that neutralize threats before they escalate. The room shifted. The word hatchet struck hard in the ears of the herbivorous Jern, who took it literally. The phrase neutralize threats was perceived by the insectoid Zarlians as a barely veiled military doctrine. A spike in pheromonal activity erupted from several rows, and 3 delegates began pressing distress glands along their necks. Theo whispered, "Next time, no metaphors. Just say we like friendship." Graves whispered back, "I'm not a kindergarten teacher." Kane chuckled under his breath. A diplomatic aide from the Liana overheard the sound low, rumbling. Mirthless San wrote in her notes. The larger one emits warning growls when tension rises, each misunderstanding twisted into a tighter knot. During the recess, the humans attempted what they thought was a gesture of goodwill. Kane brought out vacuum-sealed rations from Earth and offered them to nearby delegates. The moment he tore into a protein bar meat-based and marinated several delegates froze. The scent alone caused 2 small aquatic species to retreat behind oxygen shields. One Avrix representative, mistaking it for a dominance display, clicked madly into his translator. "They are feasting before the war." Theo frantically tried to correct the translator. "It's lunch. That's it. Just calories." The translator processed his comment and announced, "Terran digestive rituals prepare them for sustained aggression." Graves rubbed his temple. "We are losing the room." One particularly tense moment came when Theo attempted small talk with the Hersal matriarcha, being with rows of ice stalks and a sensitive photoreceptive skin. He asked casually, "Is it true your species evolved from communal hunters?" "That's fascinating. Do you still engage in ritualized conflict resolution?" The matriarch stood up immediately and declared her withdrawal from that day's proceedings, citing predatory interest in racial vulnerability. The rest of the Hersal delegation followed in her wake. Theo sat down, red-faced. "Okay, that one's on me." "It's not just you," Graves muttered. "They think we're trying to win the summit through psychological warfare." Kane leaned forward, his voice low. "If we were, it's working." The ambassador glared. "We're not trying to terrify them." "No," Kane agreed, "but we are. Everything about us is foreign to them. How we talk, how we move, how we don't flinch." "Flinching would help," Theo offered. "At least a little." Graves exhaled slowly. "Then maybe we start leaning into diplomacy through disarmament." Theo raised an eyebrow. "Metaphor." "Literal," Graves replied. "We tone it down. We sit in the back row. We listen more than we speak. Let them feel they're in control." Kane crossed his arms. "That only works if they believe we're not a threat. Right now, they think we're the kind of species that smiles after we've already won." Even the human silence was misinterpreted. When the Terrans refrained from commenting on a minor dispute between the Vrul and the Avrix over border access, their neutrality was seen as ominous. The Avrix interpreted it as implicit support for Voral expansionism. The Vrul assumed it meant disapproval. Neither side asked the humans directly. They simply took positions. By the end of the day, multiple factions had filed quiet requests to delay the peace talks and reconsider Earth's inclusion in the summit. Others sent covert envoys to the humans' quarters, offering unilateral alliances, shared intelligence, or mineral trade routes in exchange for protection or non-aggression pacts. Graves refused all offers. This summit is about collective peace, he told them. Not factions, not fear. We won't undermine that. To the alien envoys, this only confirmed their worst fears. The Terrans didn't need to make deals. They already had power in their private suite that evening. The lights dimmed to simulate Earth's dusk. Kane sat on a reinforced bench, boots off, polishing his datapad. Graves stared out the window at the stars, arms folded. Theo hunched over his desk, reviewing hours of alien body language footage. Theo broke the silence. "We've got a reputation problem." Graves turned. "How bad?" "Today. Think we're predators disguised as diplomats. Or worse, diplomats who are predators." Kane smirked. "Not entirely wrong." Theo sighed. "We need to correct it before it crystallizes into doctrine. If they believe we're manipulating them through fear, it'll poison every word we speak from now on." Graves tapped his fingers against the wall. "Then we shift the narrative." "How?" Theo asked. "We're already playing defense and we didn't even start the game." Kane looked up. "Next time something goes wrong, we respond with compassion, not competence. Show them weakness, human weakness." Graves frowned. "We've spent millennia hiding that. Maybe it's time to show we bleed," Theo said. They sat in silence, the weight of 1,000 unspoken assumptions pressing against the walls. Outside, the station's artificial gravity hummed, unaware of how close the galaxy teetered on misunderstanding. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be decided by warships or weapons. It would be decided by words and the weight behind them. The explosion came during the third session, a muffled boom that rippled through the station's lower levels like a pulse of anger. Lights flickered, protocols activated, and the air in the Grand Convergence Hall instantly shifted from tense to volatile. Panic did not erupt, it metastasized in silence. In the rigid stances and twitching limbs of diplomats, trained to mask fear but not to function under sudden threat. Captain Elias Kane was on his feet before most had even turned toward the sound. His body language changed in an instant, shoulders squared, posture coiled, gaze sharpened. The predator mask wasn't something he wore. It lived inside him, dormant until summoned Graves and Theo stood slower, scanning the room as station security scrambled for explanations. A Zelther guard announced, "Localized detonation near Section 7C. No structural compromise." The Terran quarters were the closest target. Every alien eye snapped toward the humans. Graves raised a hand calmly. "We are unharmed." "Who would target you?" asked a Vrul emissary. His voice filtered through a respiration mask. "We don't know yet," Graves replied, "but we intend to find out." "Of course you do," whispered an Avrix ambassador, barely audible over the translators. Kane was already moving. "Clear the chamber. Someone just tried to end this summit." Zilther enforcers flanked him instinctively, but they were too slow. By the time they reached Section 7C, Kane had already breached the damaged corridor. Following smoke trails and the smell of burned circuitry, a scrawny figure crouched behind a bulkhead avion, cloaked, clutching a detonator. The bomber never saw him coming. A blur of motion, 2 precise impacts, and the figure was pinned to the wall, gasping under the pressure of Kane's forearm. Blood dearescent and slick trickled down its feathers. "Name," Kane demanded. "Affiliation. Speak." The attacker squawked in panic. "Arakti Front. We reject your domination. We reject." A pressure point adjustment turned the squawk into a wheeze. Captain Graves's voice came through Kane's comm, tight with urgency. "Don't kill him. We need answers, not martyrs." Kane replied without looking up. "He's still breathing." 10 minutes later, the attacker was strapped into an interrogation chair deep within the Zilthar security annex. Graves entered. First, with Theo behind him, datapad already logging physiological responses. Kane stood in the corner, arms folded, silent as death. The prisoner trembled under the soft lighting. "I didn't mean to kill. Just send a message. You're destabilizing everything. Your kind don't belong here. You wear peace-like armor. But we see the weapons underneath." Graves leaned forward. "We're here to prevent another war." "What message do you think this sends?" The avian's eyes darted to Kane. "That you won't be stopped. Even like this, you extract truth from us." Graves sighed. "We asked you a question. You answered. That's not extraction. That's basic conversation. You terrify us." Just by being, the prisoner hissed. Theo's datapad vibrated. Heartbeat accelerated. Cortisol spike. He's speaking from genuine fear. Graves stood slowly. "Then tell the others we didn't retaliate. We didn't execute. We're still here. Still at the table." The prisoner looked away. "They won't believe me. They already think you control this station." When they emerged from the chamber, a dozen alien envoys were waiting. Not formally. Not diplomatically, just watching. Measuring word spread quickly. The humans had neutralized the attacker within minutes, extracted a confession, and returned without injury or escalation. No retaliation. No violence beyond the necessary, and yet. That restraint was what frightened them most. Theo sat on the edge of the human delegation's bench as the summit resumed, his hands fidgeting around his tablet. "We just deepened the mythos. You know that, right?" Graves nodded. There was no other move. Kane was quiet, watching again. The alien representatives leaned away from him now, even more than before. He hadn't spoken in hours. That only made it worse. Theo turned to Graves. "What if we tried vulnerability again? A public acknowledgement of how close that bomb came to killing us. Something human." "Would that show humility?" Graves asked. "Or would they interpret it as a veiled guilt trip?" Theo hesitated. "Depends on the species. Some might respect the honesty. Others might think we're playing victim to justify retaliation later." Kane finally spoke. "Stop trying to manage their fear." Both men turned. "They've already made their decision," Kane continued. "They're not afraid because we're threatening. They're afraid because we're not." Graves frowned, not following. "They can't understand us. They think in cycles, hierarchies, predators, prey, strategy. But we don't fit. We talk like diplomats, think like soldiers, and move like predators who want peace. It breaks their logic." Theo said, "So we're an anomaly. We're a paradox," Kane replied. "And nothing scarier than the unknown that doesn't follow the rules." Later that evening, a private message arrived from the Zilthar Council. The wording was polite, but the meaning was clear. Some factions were reconsidering their presence. Others had requested security reinforcements. One species, the Siltariad, preemptively pledged allegiance to the Terran Alliance. Graves read the note twice. "We're being treated like a superpower in a game we didn't join." Theo's voice was soft. "Or like the final empire in a history book they haven't finished writing." Kane smirked. "They think we're the end of their story." Graves closed the message, eyes narrowing. "Then we better write a better one." The next day would bring choices on language, on tone, on presence. But tonight, the humans stood together in silence, a unity that needed no explanation. The galaxy thought it saw predators in their skin. It had no idea that the most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their strength. It was their refusal to use it. The final session began with tension so dense it could have fractured the station's artificial gravity. The Grand Convergence Hall was quieter than usual, quieter, not calmer. Delegates sat stiffly, some in armored exosuits they hadn't worn on previous days. Several species had doubled their personal security, and a handful of seats were conspicuously empty. The Herschel and the Averix had withdrawn entirely. The Siltari envoy now sat closer to the human delegation than their own allies. No one acknowledged it, but everyone noticed Captain Elias Kane entered without ceremony, flanked by Ambassador Martin Graves and Dr. Theo Vance. The humans wore the same uniforms, the same expressions. They didn't stand taller, didn't speak louder, didn't demand the floor, and that more than anything terrified the remaining representatives. Watch their posture, Theo whispered. Half the rooms exhibiting pre-agitation behaviors. Defensive stances, adrenal pulses. They're not listening. They're anticipating an attack. They won't get one, Graves muttered, eyes scanning the crowd. But they might get a decision. The facilitator, his crystalline structure now subtly dulled by stressed, distressed. The assembly, today's purpose is final alignment. All species are to state their intent regarding the intergalactic peace accord. Should unity be unachievable, this summit will conclude under existing conditions. There was no need to explain what existing conditions meant. Uneasy truces, escalating skirmishes, and fragile borders drawn with plasma scars. The Vrol delegate stood. Before we proceed, we require clarification from the Terran delegation. Every head turned. Graves rose with calm precision. Clarify what? Representative. The Vrul adjusted his translator node. Your actions. Your philosophy. Your intent. We observe your restraint. Your power. Your refusal to exploit leverage even when given cause. These things are not normal. They are not safe. A ripple passed through the chamber, agreement murmured through bioluminescence. Tail vibrations, psychic nods. Dog Graves took a breath. Not too deep, not too slow. Theo had told him even breathing patterns could trigger suspicion. Our intent, he began, voice low but firm, is what we have stated from the beginning. Peace, real peace, not as absence of war, but as a shared commitment to coexistence, collaboration, and collective survival. He looked around the chamber, locking eyes with every species that would meet his gaze. I understand why you doubt us. You see what we're capable of, and you assume that one day we'll decide to stop pretending, that we're simply lulling you into complacency. That fear is our most powerful weapon. Graves stepped away from the podium. But you misunderstand. Fear isn't our weapon, it's our inheritance. Our history is built on it, wars we almost didn't survive, mistakes we paid for with centuries of blood. We didn't conquer the stars because we wanted to dominate. We did it because we were afraid of what would happen if we didn't. Kane stood motionless behind him, but his presence was a thunderclap in every diplomat's mind. Graves's voice dropped. We don't come in peace because we're weak. We come in peace because we're tired. Tired of burying our dead. Tired of killing first just to avoid dying second. If you think that makes us soft, you're still not listening. The silence that followed was not empty. It was loaded. Alive, a dozen delegations processed the words with algorithms, fit hormonal responses, with instinct honed over eons. They had all assumed the same thing, that power always sought expansion. That strength demanded conquest. But the humans had proven the opposite, and that made them unreadable. The facilitator stirred. The Council acknowledges the Terran statement. All representatives, please indicate your position on the accord. One by one, voices and signals confirmed it. Yes, affirmative, in agreement. For peace, we comply. Yes, yes, yes. No one said no. Some said yes for survival. Some said yes for strategy. But every single faction agreed. The accord passed, not with applause, not with celebration, with quiet, shivering awe. Outside the hall, the corridor remained quiet. The humans walked together, undisturbed by the hushed conversations behind them. Their passage was cleared not by order, but by instinct. They signed because they're afraid of us, Theo said, not quite a question. Maybe, Kane said. Or maybe they just needed someone to believe in fearlessly. Graves replied. We didn't give them fear. We gave them a mirror. Theo stopped. That speech, Martin, that wasn't in the brief. You went off script. I told the truth, Graves said, turning to him. I've spent my life choosing the right words. Today, I chose honest ones. Kane cracked a half smile. This could have gone worse. Theo raised a brow. We accidentally founded an empire of peace built on mutual anxiety. You think that's success? I think, Graves said, it's a beginning. As they approached their shuttle, a delegation was waiting. The Zilthar facilitator stepped forward, flanked by two other species, Rule and Lyana. None of them carried guards. We would like to request bilateral cultural exchange, the facilitator said. Voluntarily, not as treaty condition. Graves inclined his head. We accept. Theo offered a warm smile, dialing down the teeth. I'll make sure the smiles are explained ahead of time. The Lyana twitched their bioluminescent fins. Perhaps we misjudged your people. Graves nodded. You weren't wrong to be cautious, but you were right to hope. The Zilthor inclined their shimmering head. Then, let us all begin. The difficult task of peace, terrified together but united. They parted ways. Hours later, the human shuttle detached from the station, drifting past the pale moon below. Inside, Kane reclined against the bulkhead, arms crossed behind his head. They really thought we were here to conquer them, he mused. We still could, Theo muttered. Economically, diplomatically, psychologically. But we won't. That's what scares them. Graves said. Theo looked up from his datapad. Will that ever change? Graves stared out the viewport, the stars stretching endlessly. Maybe. One day. And until then, Kane opened one eye. Until then, we keep showing up, with words instead of weapons, with open hands and sharp minds. And if they mistake courtesy for threat, Graves smiled faintly. Then maybe fear will keep the peace better than a fleet ever could. Theo closed his pad. Next summit, I'm bringing cookies. Kane snorted. Make sure they're labeled. Someone might think it's bait. The stars winked around them, silent witnesses to the fragile, miraculous alignment that had just occurred. Not because the humans demanded it, not because they earned it, but because the galaxy finally understood one simple truth. Sometimes the scariest species in the room are the ones who choose not to be.